Nobody comes for the important stuff, right?
I mean, with all the chicken discussion, I guess I kind of got used to having people show up.
Right? Okay. Call the meeting to order. Harvard Administration Committee meeting, April 17th, 2024. We have all committee members present. No public comments unless the invisible man is here, which I don't think he is. So that goes on to item number 3 on the agenda, the proposed ordinance for water and sewer rates. Deb.
Okay, so we've already hashed all this out previously. Basically, what this is in the packet is the proposed ordinance with a new rate structure chart. And did Lori put the red line version in the packet, or just the new one?
Just the new one.
Okay, so basically the difference between the only changes that we made here is in 13C05, which is a paragraph above the rate chart. We changed, I believe it said debt service fee, and we changed it to infrastructure fee just so it was clear when they're comparing it to the bill. It's the same thing, but the bill doesn't say debt service, the bill says infrastructure. So we just cleaned that up a bit. And then your chart has changed to just reflect water sewer unit charges by unit at $9.88 instead of the previous $24.80 for the minimum usage of up to 2 whatever units. I don't remember what it was. 2.9 units or whatever. So now it's just by unit. So 1 unit is $9.88. And then if you're a water only customer, the $4.92 is the charge. The middle of the chart, the minimum charge is up to 267 cubic feet for sewer only. Those did not change. Those remain the same. We have 2 sewer only residents. We don't have any sewer only commercial, and we have 4 private pumping stations, and those are out at Bayberry. So those rates are flat fees. They don't change. It's the same flat fee every billing cycle, so those stay the same. And then there's really no way to do a by unit charge on those, so they're just those.
It's not metered, right?
Right. And so their bill is basically the same every 2 months. And then the flat fee.
I have a question. So how's that work to be a water only customer?
If you don't have sewer?
So I'm having like
I
a
don't-
nursery or?
Yeah,
There are some houses that were grandfathered and not required to hook up to sewer.
Oh, so they have a septic?
Yes.
And
Correct.
But they have city water?
Yes,
they have city water.
Oh,
And
okay.
whenever that property sells, then they're
Then they have
required to
to,
connect
okay.
within a certain
Right.
time.
And I don't recall how
Okay.
many we have left.
Only about four to six.
Yeah, there's not a
There's
whole
not a
lot
whole
left.
Oh, interesting.
So,
Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
And then the bottom of the chart is your flat fees, maintenance and EPA and maintenance stayed the same, and then infrastructure has the $10 increase. And other than that, the ordinance reads the same. We just need approval on the changes we made so that we can get that to city council for the year-end meeting next week, and then start May 1 with the May billing cycle. These rates will apply. And I think I told Alderman Gorman, but I don't know if the rest of you know, we did make the changes in BSNA. And that was done at the same time we trained Ruby on the system. So while she was on the phone, I just talked to her real quick, said, can you help us do this? She went in and changed them, and so there was no cost or anything, any additional cost to do that.
Oh, great, thank you. Any questions?
We're still eventually looking at shifting from a bi-monthly to a monthly.
We're,
Like,
we're
way down the
probably-
road,
yeah,
but I know
maybe
that-
by year 3 of this, if not at the start of the next 3-year cycle.
Okay.
Yeah, we still
And that's something still to be considered because there are additional consequences to doing so that need
Yeah.
to be vetted out. So
Yeah.
we don't anticipate to do that this billing cycle.
No. I was just curious if it was something that we were even still gonna eventually address. 'Cause it'd be
There's
cool if
labor
we could.
issues that come up if we go to a monthly billing cycle, that we need to make sure that we provide you the unintended consequences of doing
Yeah.
so, because it will affect our labor in terms of.
We have to then read the meter every,
Yeah,
every
so
month.
So now you're looking at reading the
Yeah.
meter more often, you're looking at more time, city staff to get the bills
Right.
prepared.
Oh yeah, it's
So
gonna be
it compresses everything, well.
be more
into
expensive.
More often, so.
yeah, doubles it.
Yeah, it doubles it.
Yeah, it's not like there's an economy
Right.
of scale or
Right.
something where,
Yeah.
oh,
So
it's going to take less time.
we need to be prepared to present that to you so you can make an informed decision if that makes the most sense to do.
I only wanted to ask because since we're making changes, that's something that I've had people mention to me before in conversation about water when they're upset about something. They're like, it'd be much easier for me to budget if it was every month. And I'm like, I get it, but this is why we do it. We're someday going to look into it, but not right
Can, yeah, increase the rates again to cover those costs.
now. Yeah. I do like that it's broken down. I think it was a good move to break it down so that we can see what the per unit charge is, like the way that we've got it now. I like this because it does make it more, I feel it does come across as more transparent.
Well, it simplifies it because there's no longer a minimum charge. So
Yeah,
it makes
yeah.
it, you're paying for what you use.
Yeah.
And if you're like retired person or a single person that doesn't use a lot of water, you now aren't getting penalized essentially for water that you're not using.
If you can keep it under around 2 units, this will be cheaper. For
And there are
well,
some
the first
people-
year anyway.
There are some people that,
The
that
first
will,
year.
will meet that, and,
Yeah.
and there are some small businesses that will meet that. So.
The small businesses will definitely
I
benefit
average
from
around
that.
10 to 12 units a month, every 2 months.
Yours is 10 to 12?
Yep.
What are you doing, like running the sprinkler all the time?
Have a family of nothing but women, and you'll see your water go.
I get, in the winter times, it goes about 9.
And a pool.
I can get to 9.
Mine's probably up there around sometimes between 9 and 12. And I put in a new water softener, so it meters every
Oh,
gallon
I
that goes
know.
through. So
I
now
hate
it's like,
that.
before I didn't know, now I know, and it's painful when I have to
It is.
refill it. I'm like, oh man.
Deb gave me the raw numbers in a spreadsheet, and so I went through just to see what, I mean, we know what the mean is. We kind of knew it was around 13, we thought, or something like that. Well,
16.
I think it's 14.
16, 10, and 6. Mean,
Huh?
median, and mode. 16, 10, and 6. That's
Yeah.
what you told me that day. I wrote it
Okay,
down.
16.
Oh.
And 10 is the
Median, yes.
median, which means, half the
half the users
users
are above that,
above
half
it.
are below.
And the mode is 6. So more customers use 6 than any other number.
Interesting,
So that just gives us an idea of
yeah. Good
where we are.
distribution.
Which brings me to this question. Are we going to do anything to let them know this, or are we just going to send them a bill?
Well, in the past, what we have done is notified via social media, and then their bill comes, stating that they'll see the increase in price.
But unfortunately, this one goes, well, I guess, yeah, because it's affected. When's the next billing one again?
May. It's in May. Yeah.
So the
So-
one in July, in July is when they would see the increase, right? It's May and June.
No, the new rates are already entered to begin in May, so they'll see it with their bill in May.
So we
When
do
does-
get a
what-
bill in May?
No, you'll get a bill in June.
June,
Oh,
okay. that's
It'll
what
be
I'm-
due in June.
Yeah, that's why
It'll be due in
yeah.
June. Yes.
So
Gotcha.
middle of May, you get it.
Yes.
So what I think we can do is add a note on the bill that, new rates are in effect effective May 1. That should be an easy thing we could add to the bill so that when they get it, they can recognize that the rates have been revised.
I mean, most people won't pay attention to that anyway, and then they're going to look at their next bill and be like, where did this come from? And it's been in front of their face for 3
Well,
months.
yeah,
So.
that's gonna happen.
Yeah,
But at least
so-
we do our part.
Yeah, I mean.
Sure.
Yeah, I agree. We should have
You're still
something
gonna
in
get the
writing.
one saying I have $300. It's always only been 100.
You know, through this process, we actually had a lot of justification along the way, but it really hasn't been well documented, you know, anywhere.
Yeah, you'd have to piece it together from like snippets from minutes.
Yeah,
or
I mean, all the
something.
reasons why we're doing this, and you know, what we're looking at down ahead. You know, the infrastructure, even though we did build a new plant, we still have all the pipes and so on to deal with. EPA issues, my basement. But anyway, I'm just saying that I think that we really do need to capture that. And even if it's not, you know, like you said, they don't look at it right away. I mean, they don't look at it and then they get the bill and then what happened? It would give them a place to go for the justification. I mean, it's an after-the-fact device as well. And
Put on the website?
yes,
Yeah.
that's what I'm thinking, is
Yeah.
that we could. You know, it might be 2 or 3 pages long because
Right.
there's a lot to capture that we went through along the way. I mean, you know, I don't know. I know that's a lot of work for someone, but and I actually kind of took a shot at it, but kind of in an outline form. But I'm not sure of all the numbers, you know, and so on, and all the detail. And in something like this, the detail really needs to be correct.
Can you send me your outline? And then maybe together you and I can,
Well, I'll have to clean that up too, but,
Yeah.
you know, it's just kind of a disjointed thing right now.
Well, I think it's, you know, it would make sense to help create more transparency of how the decision was made. So
Right.
I think it's a worthy thing to
Yeah.
put up.
Yeah, we could even include some, you know, I used the mean, median, and mode to build a sample bill. You know, not it doesn't look like the bill, but all the numbers are there.
yep, you showed me.
For
It's pretty nice.
6, 10, and 16. And even including those might be helpful in something
Yeah.
like that, you know, because it does show it over the 3-year period.
Yeah, we could do something like that if we worked with your outline from the perspective of a homeowner and elected official and plug the numbers in and make it something that's simple enough that people are not going to be like overwhelmed reading it. And then the girls up front can reference, you know, when people say, why did my water bill go up? They can have the link, you know, hand them the link or say, you know, here, you can
Right.
find out the information on the website type thing.
Exactly.
Right, that's,
I think that's reasonable.
yeah, and the link is something you could put on social media too. And
Sure.
then that would just be, so those that are interested could go right there. Those that need to be interested after the fact.
Can go there, it's still.
Yes, right.
I think that's a really good point, Charlie, because I think that a lot of constituents are predisposed to assume that we operate in a vacuum when we make these decisions, and even though every municipality has their own issues and systems and why their bills are the way, because you said our structure for bills is a little different from the other ones, but it's important that they know that we also look very diligently at the other municipalities so that we're trying to keep our pricing, you know, comparable to what other places are, even though they have their own thing. Because, like, Deb, like you mentioned when we were looking at this, that a lot of the other cities have had to start either getting ready to invest in water system improvements or they're in the middle of doing that. So, and I wanted to see, like, annually how we compare over the next few years, because all of a sudden, you know, they could go from, you know, a couple $100 every 2 months to like 700 or 800 because now they've got an insane system they got to pay for.
Well, and then Woodstock just announced significant increase
Yeah.
in their rates, so, yeah.
Yeah.
I think something like for the referendum, the slideshow presentation you did, or the PowerPoint, you know, with the facts on the side, if we wrote up something like that where, you know, bringing together everything we've discussed, the plant, the lead lines, the, you know, the I&I, all of those things that we need to start spending some money on to get back up to speed, I think that would be very beneficial in explaining why we need to do this.
Might actually work out, you guys, for a good template to follow too, for like other things that we do in town, like when we make a decision on something that's big. I mean, even like the road program or whatever. If there's like a John Q. Public friendly template to follow, then that would be cool for us going forward when we do something to better explain. Because I think also too, because it's going through my head when we're talking about this, that being on the website and having a presentation like that would also be good for like business development and stuff, because companies can come in and say, oh, you know, the city's doing these things to better their infrastructure, and it's clear as day. It's not, you know, muddy water like most, you know, political systems are. So I think that would actually work out in our benefit, like going forward. I'd love to see
So we have about a month
that.
to work on that and get it published, roughly, give or take.
I think you want to get it out there before the,
Before,
Bill's
definitely
act-
before the bill goes out,
yeah.
right?
Thank you
Very cool.
for that idea and for offering to do that.
And you're right, Dan. You're absolutely right. On across the board, everything the city does needs to be. This is something I've been harping on since I first became an alderman, and
Yeah.
I'm glad to see that it's kind of starting to maybe take some root.
The hard part, Charlie, is getting the bedrock of the vision in place. But like when you do something like that and you put together at least just an outline, then that moves the ball along a lot faster, I think. So I commend you for putting that work in.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, do we have a motion?
I'll motion to approve. I don't see any issues with it. I like this.
Second.
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we have an ordinance.
Well,
No, you're gonna send it to the.
Okay, we have a proposed ordinance for
For
the
the
city
council.
council.
Yeah.
Recommendation
Yes.
for a proposal.
For the city council. Sorry,
no worries.
jumped the gun. Okay, item number 4, fund balance policy. Back to
Okay.
Deb.
This has been on the radar for a really long time, and we're at the tail end of the fiscal year, so we'd like to get this adopted before the audit so that they can take that off of our recommendation list. This is something that this committee previously directed us to do. The policy itself is, you know, I didn't write it myself. I'm not that smart. I got it from the auditors who get it from the GASB standards. So it's basically a boilerplate, and then we take the sections that apply to us and tweak those. So basically, it explains an overview of the purpose of a fund balance policy, which is to establish target minimums so that we can stay within the financial stability that we need to have to operate should things not go so well with the economy. It gives a definition of the different types of funds that we have and how those are restricted, unrestricted, and basically just a general definition of proprietary funds, the city operating funds, your different types of fund balances. You have the committed fund balances, which are constrained and based on city council approval. And then you have the assigned fund balances, which the city council gives staff direction to spend within limits. So what I want to direct you to as far as what we're looking at specifically would be section 4A2, which is highlighted on page 2 of the draft. Originally, we had discussed and kicked around a fund balance target for the general fund, which is what we're talking about right now. And this is our major operating fund. This is where most of our expenditures come out of. We had originally kicked around a fund balance of 6 to 9 months. Looking at that a little closer and doing some research, I think that's a bit aggressive. And the reason why, if you look at the spreadsheets that I gave you when I first came in, I did a 3-year analysis of our fund balance history in the general fund. And if you start at the top, this was our most recent audit. So last year, as of April 30th, we had 6.6 months of fund balance revenue. So we were within the 6 to 9 months. But if you look at fiscal 21, 22, and 2021, we weren't quite there, especially in 2021.
Good.
I'm not quite sure why. We just had basically more expenses that year than we did revenue assets.
Right, because of this building and,
There were quite a few things going on all at
Yeah.
the same time. So with going with the 6 to 9 month, my fear is that we will be in violation of our own policy. We don't want to do that. Once we set the policy, we need to stick with it, which is part of the reason why the policy's been avoided for so long. However, it's what our investors look at, and it gives us the fiscal strength that we should have. So I'm recommending 3 to 6 months. And if you look at the way it's worded in section 2, anything above, operating expenditures above 6 months may be transferred to other funds or to capital projects upon city council approval. And what that does is it doesn't require us to transfer those funds. However, it gives us the option, if we're really doing well and we're, 9 or 10, 11, 12 months of fund balance and we want to kick something over for, equipment replacement, capital improvement, we have the option of doing that. So that would be my recommendation for the general fund. The other funds that are named typically in a fund balance are your special revenue funds. We have quite a few. These are funds that are funded primarily by property tax levy, and they're restricted and committed revenue sources. So they have to be used for the fund in which they are designated. We have so I'm looking now at 4B, 2A through K. Those are all of our special revenue funds with just a brief definition of what they're used for. We do not need to set fund balances for all of these. In fact, it would kind of be going overboard to do that. The auditors specifically recommended that we set a fund balance for the library fund as well as the park fund. When I was speaking with our auditor, I was a little hesitant to do something with the park fund, just basically because, as you know, that's a fund that we just corrected after having a large deficit for several years. He completely understood that and recommended at this time we don't need to include the park revenue or the park fund in the fund balance policy. It is something we can look at down the road and revise the policy. Once we get the new director in and get a year or so under our belt, we can look back at it and see what kind of fund balances we're looking at and then set our minimum at that point. So for now, looking at the highlighted, for the library, the highlighted 3A, special revenue funds are worded a little bit differently when it comes to balances. We don't specifically do a month fund balance as much as we do a percentage of an annual budget, which then it can be adjusted annually based on where the numbers come in at the end of the fiscal year. So if you look at the second page of the spreadsheet, I also did a 3-year history of the library fund, and they've done pretty well considering there's 12 months in the year, so a 25% level would be 4 months, a 4-month target. And if you look at the last 3 fiscal years, the most recent, they had an 11.2-month fund balance. So they're very healthy there. The previous year, 11.3, and then 2021, they had a 7-month fund balance. So there will be no problem at this point meeting that 25%. If it becomes an issue, then we just readjust and look at it each budgeting year.
Well, I think part of it is, that part of it is they have funds that they're holding for projects like the parking lot, right?
I'm not sure if she's paying the parking lot out of the city funds or if she's using the separate funds that the board governs for that.
Okay.
But yes, they do have, yes and no.
I mean,
And-
it's from the levy that replaced the bond.
Okay, then yes.
It's the
If she's to be-
capital
yes, okay.
funds, yeah.
So, and I
So
do
they-
want
They
to,
put aside at least 50,000 a year.
yes, you're right, they
that-
do transfer,
that
right.
is there for capital.
So that's included in their
Yeah.
assets, which would affect their fund balance.
Okay.
Because it would be outside of
Yeah.
their liabilities. So yes, it would boost up their assets.
Okay.
So, when the auditors come this year, I want to talk to them because I want to see how this works as far as, do they really need to carry an 11-month fund balance? They need 25% according to this policy, which is 4 months, but then there's really no provision in here for what happens when the when it exceeds almost a year. So I need to talk to them about how exactly we do that as far as could they use some of that fund balance or what the procedure is there. I don't know.
Do they have a special fund for capital improvement?
Yeah.
Their own fund? For
Yeah,
capital
that was that levy that
improvement?
they
No, no,
continued.
I
Yeah.
understand that. Is all this money in one fund, or is,
No, they have money in,
This money's in our general checking account,
yeah.
right, so if some
but
of
in the
this
library fund on paper.
Okay,
Right.
right. So if some of this money is earmarked for those capital improvements, like a roof or the
Mm-hmm.
parking lot, could they create, if they haven't already, a special fund like we have for
For capital
for
improvement.
capital improvements?
We wouldn't do that for them.
No, I understand.
They would have to, but if they were going to use these funds, like if we were going to transfer these funds in excess of the 25%, it would require us literally cutting a check from our general fund and giving it to them. So and that's why I have to talk to the auditors about how to do
All right,
that.
and so that creates some problems because we're the fiduciary
Correct,
guardians of this funding for them. So,
correct.
because we manage the money and then write the checks out of that fund.
Right.
So I see the,
So like for us, if we were running at like a 10 or 11 month fund balance in the general fund, I can do a transfer.
Yeah.
A manual transfer on the bank from cash transfer from general fund to the capital improvement fund, book it in the system, and it's done. I'm not quite sure how you do that with the library fund, so I'd have to, it is something on the list to talk to the auditors about when they're here in May.
well, again, the fund balance policy would allow you to keep more than the
Yes.
4 months
Right.
that's targeted.
Just not
But-
less
but
than
as it's getting
25%.
more and more, we should understand what
Yeah.
we should, what they could
Yeah.
do
Right.
to help.
Yeah, and
You
is
know,
is
write
there
that,
a way
if
to
you will, right?
set
Right.
something like that?
Because if there's a
Yeah.
possibility that they can do more with their money than just leave it in a fund balance, then we need to pursue that,
Yeah.
Right.
for sure.
It also, I'm wondering, could they transfer some of that to a temporary CD where they could generate interest for their fund if they're not, if they're saving up money to do a project.
That would be outside of our
Okay,
decision-making.
Fair enough. That would be
Yeah.
on the library themselves.
Yeah.
too, so.
Well, and they do with the capital funds. I mean, they do have some money in a CD at one of the banks. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll get all those answers, and actually, the same auditor, Brad, that I work with, Karen also works with, so we could, we'll be on the same page with all that and how that works. But since this is so new and it's nothing we've never pursued, I just don't have the answer on that, other than wanting to assure that the library fund balance that we manage does not drop below 25%.
So
Or the
ours
4
could
month.
eventually kind of look like this once we get the capital improvement fund vested more, right? Because a lot of this is from capital improvement on the library. It's holding there to use later on for big improvements.
Yeah, so a lot of this money that's there currently is the money that was generated from the levy,
Yeah.
which was the referendum that they approved.
Well, I mean, they
That
set
is
aside a
earmarked.
bunch to
Yeah.
earmark to do these like parking lots, like what we've been starting to do the last couple of years, and then with Lou on board, trying to do ours. Ours could look could get up to 7%, 7 or 8 months.
That's where she was saying for the city,
Yeah.
for city funding, we can transfer that to
Yeah.
capital improvement.
I'm saying, because we have that, then ours will even look healthier.
No, well,
Because
So-
this one looks like it's healthier, from the way you explained it, maybe I misunderstood. How
no.
the library is. 'Cause they have
The
all that
library's-
money sitting there.
There's quite a bit of fund balance there. As far as the general fund goes, the reason why we cap it, why I'm recommending 3 to 6, is because if you start to get to 7, 8, 9%, or
No, I get that part. I'm saying later on when our new capital improvement fund has gotten invested more, when we put more away to invest, it's going to show that we're actually doing better than the 3 to 6 months.
Actually,
No, because it's two different accounts, so
Right.
it's,
Okay, so it won't on there, just the libraries, because how they're set up,
the
that's
key-
why it
the
shows
key,
it?
The key to that is if you look at on the very first page of the spreadsheet, unassigned fund balance. Okay.
it's what's left over after everything
So
that's
when you
been
put
committed
something
is
into
gone.
Capital improvement or equipment improvement
Okay,
or
'cause
anything
ours
like that,
says
it's
unassigned.
assigned at that point.
Okay,
It would
because
not
they don't
count.
have that on theirs, that's why, in the library, so that's
Well,
why this
so-
looks different.
Once we transfer to the capital improvement account, the capital improvement account is not part of this policy because it's not a separate fund. We don't have a capital improvement fund. We have a capital improvement checking account that's operated through the general fund, but it's not part of the fund balance policy. So the fund balance policy will always fluctuate between the fund balance, according to this policy, will always fluctuate between 3 and 6 months. The capital improvement account in which we transfer the excess into is not a good indicator of any kind of fiscal strength because we're going to spend it,
Oh, yeah,
right?
but that's so with the library, that's what it shows with theirs, because you were just explaining that the capital improvement, they have a bunch sitting there. for
But
that.
they have separate accounts that we do not.
I get that.
Control.
So that's why theirs looks so, like 11 months, because they've had so many, it went up from 7 to 11 months last 2 years, because they've been putting that money aside, not spending it, but it stays in the same thing. It's not
Stays
like
in the
ours.
fund,
Yeah, it doesn't go out like
Right.
ours.
yes.
So what Mike was suggesting was that on their side, if they could do it or wanted to do it, it would make sense for them to set up like like how we have a separate checking
Right.
account.
I'm
or a
just trying to
separate
see if
line.
I was understood exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, basically, I mean, on paper, if you didn't know any of that, it would look like they're just sitting on a pile of cash and
Yeah.
they're not doing
Building
anything
a
with
war
it. and
chest.
yeah, just sitting on unused money, but they have big projects that they've said they're going to do with it. So it gets difficult when people are looking and going, well, why do they have all that money? It's like, what are they doing with it? Why are we giving them more money when they have all this
Right.
money? And it's like, well, no, because that's
They're going to
They've
spend
already-
$200,000.
yeah,
on
they're putting a
Yep.
parking
parking
lot in.
lot. Yeah.
Sure.
Or roof, or windows.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Is on their list of
Yeah.
capital improvement.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So is there a test that this goes through to make sure it does what it's supposed to do? I mean,
Yeah, you're looking at it on those spreadsheets. It's called an audit. Every year the audit tells us. So these figures on these spreadsheets are directly from the audit. It's from the balance sheet and from the fund balance in the audit. Expenditure revenue report. So your unassigned fund balance is the fund balance after they've done all their calculations on your balance sheet. And then the operating expenditures is your revenue and expenditure report. I got these numbers directly from the last 3 years' audits. So that's the test, is each year, when the audit comes through, we see where we're at and we know where we need to be for the following year.
So now,
so,
this year will be our first year in a long time where, for the parks, we'll actually have a true, without this
Correct.
thing hanging
Because if you look
over
on
it.
page 3, and this is the reason why I'm not recommending we put the parks in right now. Yeah, so, the parks have been improving over time slowly, but this next fiscal year will be a significant improvement based on the fact that we transferred funds, not cash dollars, but funds in the tune of $752,000 from the general fund to the park fund. So now remember that your park fund or your general fund might not be as healthy
Right.
this next fiscal year, or at the end of this
Wait
fiscal
10
year.
years and we probably would have got even.
Because we transferred 750 from that fund
Right.
to take care of this fund. So it will drop a little bit more, which is another reason I'm going 3 to 6 instead of 6 to 9.
Yeah.
And hopefully we won't have to subsidize that anymore moving forward, if things go as planned.
Well, and it also, like you said, we're going to need probably a good 2 to 3 years of the new structure of
Right.
monitoring the park fund so
Right.
that we have an idea of what their real numbers are going to look like. Because we just basically, we haven't had any idea for a
No.
long time. We just kept adding to the
Yeah,
debt.
it's just like, okay.
And keep
it's
in mind
just a
too,
big
when
hole.
we're discussing this, we're only talking about 3 to 6 months of operating expenditures.
Yeah.
What we need to keep the lights on, pay the staff, basically feed ourselves, right? So that's what that is for. It's not for, we got to buy new trucks and all this this is just basic operating expenditures.
And that's what that number, like in this, for the parks, 27,537. 12-month operating expenditure average, right?
I'm 27,
Negative 27.3
that's the
months.
average operating expenditures, yes. So basically, that's on the 330, 439 divided by 12. So, and then it gives you your 12 month. So that's how much we would need every month to operate the parks.
At least the number goes, more positive. over
Yes, it did a little better.
Less,
I
less
said about 10
negative.
years, we could
Yeah.
just.
Yeah,
sell
you
them.
just
It's
wait
because,
10,
well,
15
we
years,
closed the
zero
pool
out.
one year, so that helps because of COVID, but.
So in theory, what you can do here is, going back to the first page of the spreadsheet, is you saw we went over the last 3 years, last 3 full fiscal years, we went from 3.3 months to 5.8 to 6.6. When you're consistently over 7 months, and you're talking like maybe 3-4 years that you're consistently over 7 months, that's when the council can take and move funds over into like a capital improvement fund where it's already designated and only drop it down to 6 months. But you want to make sure that you've got more than enough, and that's where having the bare minimum of 3 months means that should we have, because some of you remember when we had to take out small loans in order to even make payroll.
Yeah.
So you want to leave enough room, but
So we don't have to do that, hopefully.
down the road, again, if we've done everything right and we've got growth going on, and we've got, more tax revenues coming in and so on, as far as with that growth, and you're starting to push that 7 months plus, after you peel some off, you can also go back to the policy because you have the template and go, maybe right now it's a minimum of 3 months, you can move it to 4 months. You don't want to go too aggressive because should things change, and it will change in a heartbeat when it does, you're not going to get a penalty, because this helps us as far as making us look better, especially when it's time to go for bonds or loans. It shows that we're being fiscally smart with the money. But if you get too aggressive with it and it backlashes, it can also be a very, very big slap against us.
No, makes perfect sense.
I'm
sorry, go ahead.
That's why I had that question. I wasn't questioning the amounts. I was questioning the arbitrary choice of 3 to 6 or 6 to 9. And, and it seems like we moved that to make it fit our situation.
And upon recommendation of the auditor or information from the auditors, most communities do 3 to 6.
Okay, so that's
Yes.
the reason.
I
Okay.
think I remember him actually saying
Yeah,
that in the
most of
last
their
audit.
clients do 3 to 6. And
Well-
he didn't really seem to say much about the 6 to 9. And then when I came back with, hey, I've been looking at this, he's like, the majority of our communities do 3 to 6. It just doesn't, it doesn't tie our hands as much.
Right.
Because as Lou said, there's going to be things that happen that we can't control. I mean, history's cyclical, right? It's
Yeah.
going to happen again at some point, and we just have to be prepared for that.
Well, and we have a job to do.
Mhm.
And so, just saving money, having money set aside, just have money set aside just in case, can limit us doing our job.
Right.
So,
Right, you don't want to save too much because then
Yeah.
we're not spending it on
Right,
what we're
on
supposed
what
to,
we're
and that is
supposed
improving
to.
the community
Exactly.
and giving back to the
Yeah,
taxpayers. Right.
exactly.
We're kind of
Absolutely.
growing in.
It's their
I'm
money.
sorry.
Yeah.
We're
ahead.
kind of growing in this philosophy of making sure that we've got standards, or at least guardrails up, guidelines, if you want to refer to it that way. Eventually, and this is where I was pointing to one of your questions, was this is unassigned funds. When you start throwing money into the capital improvement funds, those are designated funds. Those would not affect the unassigned. Those actually get removed from this total. So if you were to say, take the 0.6 and move it into capital improvement, that's an assigned fund, so it automatically comes out of this, and it would drop us down to a 6-month average. Okay, just keep that in mind. So as we progress in the right direction here, I say this because, we have a floor of 3. It may look good and like we're consistently hitting, just above 6, but not over the 7 mark. You don't want to move too much over, because once it's assigned, it's assigned. And it's, you start running into potential violations when you try to yank it back out.
So in this case, the unassigned fund balance that we're using for calculations is what's left over after our liabilities have been subtracted from our assets. Those liabilities being, as of April 30th, everything we've spent for the year plus what we've accrued. meaning they look ahead a month to our accrued payroll, our accrued, what we've spent, what we've purchased in April but haven't been billed for. What we've the amount of time our employees have worked in April that we haven't paid for. So it's accrued forward, so that unassigned balance is what's left after that. That is strictly a balance in the general fund. Restricted or special revenue is what we would transfer over above and beyond the 9 months. So that's not restrict or unrestricted, or I'm sorry, unassigned, it would be special revenue restricted, not assigned. Does that make sense?
So it would be in one of these other funds?
Yes.
Okay.
It would move to one of those other funds as a special revenue, and it would be spendable only on what was designated upon city council approval. So we might move it to the capital improvement fund upon approval, and then at a later date decide what we're going to spend it on, and then get permission to do that.
So we don't currently have a capital improvement fund?
We do.
Oh, but it's not on
Just
the
to help build.
It's not a special revenue fund.
Yeah. Just a checking account right now, right?
It's not designated for one specific purpose.
Oh, okay,
Flexibility
Right.
of
Okay.
defining
Right.
what
okay.
And that's-
improvements happen to be.
Okay.
Right.
That would be the next progress on this, is to start in that direction. And then also keep in mind the same thing. We do live in the Midwest. There are natural disasters. When you go to write the capital improvement fund or anything like that, you also include a clause that should an emergency happen, you can access those funds, but you'll replenish them once the emergency is over. Just to keep that in mind.
That makes perfect
But
sense.
I'm getting way ahead of ourselves here.
Okay.
At this point, we can do whatever we want with it.
Right.
So we wouldn't have to replenish it.
Well, I mean, I like the changes here too, because it also, when we get into budgeting season, we can see like what these overages are, or what the, this like unassigned fund balances are. It gives us a better idea of, instead of having so much sitting in there for that 9-month limit, it gives us a little bit more flexibility within our range, because we're not gonna, I mean, I don't see us going to, having a tax windfall that's gonna go up by like 80% or anything in the next few years, but that frees up that extra, let's just say 3 months of funding that we go through each year, that we can move
Well,
around and actually do something.
If we do find a dinosaur bone when we start digging up Milky Way Park,
The best way to describe the funds listed as special revenue funds in this is any fund that's listed in A through K. Yes, A through K are all funds you will see in the audit. These are all funds that are reportable in the audit. Some of them might not be specifically broken out. Some of them will be under others. And you will also see these funds in the budget. What you don't see in the budget is something like the capital improvement fund or the equipment replacement fund. You also don't see those in the audit, which means they're not restricted, right? So we don't budget for them. We also don't report them as a fund balance policy because there is no fund balance that's required in those funds. That's strictly a money market savings account for improvements, and therefore we can use those for, it's not restricted. So our options are very wide open with those.
It's restricted by city council on what they get to
Correct.
spend.
And that would be under, when you're looking at your definitions of your different types of non-spendable fund balances, restricted fund balances, and unrestricted fund balances. And anything that says upon city council approval or by direction of city council would be those things that we could do with what we'd like to do as long as we get approval to do it. Buy a building, purchase a vehicle, those types of things. Does that make sense?
That makes total
I think
sense.
so.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, we have to have the ability to define what capital improvements are going to be.
And that's
You
where
can't operate without that.
that's where it's important to do things like we did a couple years ago when we developed our capital improvement policy, or I'm sorry, our capital improvement plan, is we went and we looked 5 years ahead and we sat down. It was quite lengthy. It was a 2 or 3 week study session, and then the actual plan was written. And we look at, okay, so we have $200,000 in our capital improvement account. That's what we have saved and moved over. We don't budget for that. It's not, it's not specifically designated for anything. Let's look at our capital improvement plan and say, oh, that was on the 3-year plan. We're hitting 3 years. Let's see if we can do that with the money that's in our capital improvement account. And that's why you have a plan, right? Instead of
Right.
just willy-nilly saying, oh, well, let's do this today and that tomorrow. We have something to focus on.
And the plan was set priorities of projects based on a lot of different criteria. It was interesting the way because they're weighted based on how important they are for
Right.
the community. And so that gives you, it's a plan, right? Here's the top priority thing we wanted to accomplish, and it's top priority because
Boiler.
it's, for whatever reason, that particular improvement is needed, so.
And so do we have I apologize for not knowing the answer, but do we have a target for how much we want in that fund? And,
No.
okay,
So what I would suggest that we do to achieve that is to, maybe, are we having another committee of the whole meeting at some point?
Yes?
To take, maybe put on the agenda, to review the capital improvement plan, see where we're at. And I think I gave you guys an update couple months ago, and it was no action. It was just, informational on what we've achieved and what we haven't. And maybe see where we're at and what we've got on the near, horizon for what we wanted to do, because I suspect that that's gonna change a little bit, or has changed. And maybe start looking at what we have in the account and what we can maybe apply those funds to now, and what we wanna start moving some funds to that account for in the future, and maybe revise that plan a little bit. Because
Yeah.
we'll be in year 3, I think, this year.
I think it needs a refresh to make sure that the priorities that are set are still the same priorities.
right.
Because, like anything, priorities change with anything
Yeah.
personally or with the city. So, this project now has a higher priority for this reason. So I think it would be worthy, especially with new staffing, to go through that again.
I think that goes through 27, if I remember correctly. So once we established that and got, met that goal, then we could start maybe in the following year, look at another 5-year plan. You want to probably start developing that next 5-year plan by 25, 26, so that you can have it completely ready to go by 27, 28.
So when my nonprofit did a capital equipment plan, which very different scale than the city, but we came up with the inventory of the equipment that we had, useful life, what,
Mhm.
replacement costs, and did a 20-year, looking forward 20 years, and came up with what, on average, how much do we need each year, recognizing that it's probably like going to happen in big chunks, just because of similar age to things. And so then came up with a plan. We were able to start the fund with a certain amount, and then came up with a plan for how much to add
Right.
each year, so that regardless of what we take out for a need that comes up, that over the course of 10 years, the fund will be sustainable.
So, and we're a little bit ahead of the game as far as our capital improvement plan goes, because we have an account. It's got a fund balance, and we also have a plan. As far as the equipment replacement account goes, we could actually pursue looking into an equipment replacement plan as well. That account's been around for a while, but it hasn't really been aggressively funded, or there really has not been a plan to fund it other than 50,000 or $100,000 a year transfers,
Yeah.
from the general fund, subsidized by the,
Established a
Yeah, we haven't done the
designated
plan.
revenue stream to fund.
correct. And so we've changed that a little bit in that we took what the fund balance was and we divided it up between the departments. So this is on a separate spreadsheet I'm keeping track. So each department got a share of what is currently in the account. And then as Public Works scraps property, scraps metal or wastewater, auction surplus property, whatever comes in now, instead of saying, oh, that all gets thrown in the general fund, it gets designated to the equipment replacement fund and then
Okay.
logged under each department. Like the PD just auctioned some bikes. So whatever we got for those bikes went into the equipment replacement account, and then I logged it under the PD. So they have balances to work with. The problem is those balances aren't very big. They each have 25,000 right now and some change. Because when we were funding it through the transfers, we were spending it at the same time.
Right.
So, 100, we had 150 grand in there, we spent 100. So now there's only 50 grand in there, so
Right.
then we start again. Because we didn't have a plan, right? It
Right.
was just, oh, we need this, oh, there's 100 grand here, let's buy it.
Yeah.
Which is okay, when you're working on a
Right.
smaller scale, but if you really want to build that account and that fund so that you can do bigger and better things and have a 20-year game plan, then
Yeah.
then you need something in writing and something structured,
Right.
right?
So I know we've been talking about that too, and I know Lou mentioned he's gonna be working on that too, the equipment replacement plan.
Yeah, and just to, I'm just going to take a step back. So in theory, we know a pickup truck is about $30,000 because we get the government rate. We have about 5 trucks, say, in Public Works with a 10-year useful lifespan. You're talking about putting roughly $30,000 or $3,000 per truck or $15,000 a year, so that by year 10 you can go and replace all 5. The thing is, you want to make sure it's staggered so that you're not replacing all 5 at once. So, and again, without like drawing it out on a spreadsheet, what ends up happening is you're able to fully fund it without taking away from your operating funds.
Right.
Essentially what we did with the police department. Instead of trying to replace 5, 6, 7 squad cars every 10, 12 years, it was 2 a year, whatever we
Well, but
determined.
see, when you're doing that though, you're doing it out of the operating
Right.
fund and not
Correct,
out of the
but
equipment reserve.
You're doing it out of annual
yeah,
money.
you'd be doing
Yeah.
the same thing, but out of a reserve fund. You're just staggering it. You're just you're doing it out of a separate
See, and
fund instead of
Illinois is a little
directly-
different, so I'm going to get the evil eye from Deb, I'm sure, on this. But so,
Have an evil eye.
well, so like in other communities, what we would do is we would set that same $15,000. We would already, as part of the operating budget, take it would be listed there as $15,000 in transfer to go into equipment reserve.
That's what we did this year with the
Okay.
HVAC system. With Jane, right? We transferred, or we're going to be transferring 100 grand. And that being said, yes, that's part of the budgeting process moving forward, is each department head has the option of looking carefully at what they need versus what they want, right? And maybe putting some of those wants aside this year so that they can transfer some of their own money into the equipment replacement fund like we did with the HVAC.
Sure.
So,
Yeah,
wherever that 100 grand could have been spent somewhere else in the admin fund, we decided we'd like to transfer it into the equipment replacement fund so we can replace eventually the HVAC system. We could have spent it on something else, but we decided to transfer it into there. So that's earmarked once at the end of, it's going to be quarterly transfers, right? So once April 2025 comes along and you look at my spreadsheet, you're going to see 100 grand under admin. And it's going to be earmarked for the HVAC system,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So that's that's kind of something we threw in there as part of the budgeting process, so everybody's kind of a little bit more focused on looking forward and saving a little bit for improvements, especially with the age of our equipment.
Yeah.
So,
When you start to do the equipment reserve, is you also know that in 5 years you have to go back and look at what the market is. Because right now, it's what, government contract for a pickup truck is about 28,000.
no, that was 2 years ago.
2 years
so,
ago,
yeah.
sorry, 2 years ago. So let's just say 30,000 for right now.
Right.
5 years from now, it could be 35, and you make those adjustments. I call it a peekaboo, or no, sorry, looky-loo. You just look around and see what's going on in the market. So then you can make those adjustments. So, and that's again why you stagger it so that you're not depleting the fund right away. Because again, what if an emergency happens? Storm comes up, trucks got knocked out. We need to go get trucks.
Yeah.
They may get replaced by FEMA, but you got to get rolling now.
Right.
Yeah, can't wait for that money.
Right.
It makes total sense. Most businesses that have a vehicle fleet do a similar thing with their accounting where they're depreciating out the value of those
Yeah.
vehicles over a period of time, whether they're putting the mileage on them or not. They're depreciating them out, and then once the vehicles have completely depreciated, they either auction them off or, get new ones, but you don't want to be doing your entire fleet in one go, because it's just going to be way too much money in one
And then-
sitting. So it makes total sense to do it. I wish we'd have done this
Yeah.
10 years ago, because
But we weren't here
yeah.
10 years ago.
Different, you're talking 10 years ago, you were still, the city was going through some growing pains and was
Yeah.
suffering in certain areas.
A recession.
So,
Yeah.
but, so what ends up happening is then, is you have the equipment reserve as its own separate, account, and the capital improvement can be geared more towards, land acquisition, road, development. So I could see Charlie smile a little bit on that one. But buildings and building improvement. So, every 20 some odd years, we got to start gearing up for when a roof has to be replaced, and that's not cheap. But if you've already got the money set aside, this way, when you have them, and again, this is what I've done others, it's got to be tweaked for here, but what ends up happening is that you can still buy equipment and take care of your buildings
Right.
without it affecting the operating funds of the
Yeah,
city.
it's not like, oh, we've got to replace a roof this year, so we've got to lay some people off.
But, and I'm sorry, Deb, I got
No,
way
it's
off
okay.
on a tangent.
So, the other highlight in the policy is, page 4. And this is under the sewer, this is basically sewer water fund. And I think I did, yes, the sewer water enterprise fund, which is, again, proprietary. It's operated like a business. We sell a service that the community pays for. The fund balance here reads unrestricted, and again, unrestricted, so everything that's left over after our liabilities have been subtracted from our assets, and also based on an accrual basis. Net assets targets should represent no less than 3 months of operating expenses. Important note, this is excluding debt service and capitalized assets. This is very important because our debt service is very high. If we were to subtract that out as part of our liabilities, we wouldn't make the 3 months. So these are just strictly operating expenses for 3 months outside of the debt service and the capitalized assets. And then the only other highlight, basically, I didn't highlight it actually in the document, but would be Section 5 is other considerations. And these are considerations that help us should things not go as planned. The volatility of the market or our expenditures, our exposure to significant one-time outlays, natural disasters, the potential that we would need to drain general fund resources to help subsidize other funds, which has happened, and then liquidity, the disparity with our financial resources, and commitments and assignments if we wish to maintain higher unrestricted fund balances, or anytime basically we would want to reevaluate this and make changes. So the last sentence, if any of the above factors change, the city should readdress current unrestricted fund balances and net assets levels to ensure amounts are appropriate. So this is something we will revisit every audit year, right? And under their guidance and looking at the numbers at the end, have we met this? Is it sustainable? Is something need to change? So it's a yearly thing, and it's important because, again, we don't want to violate our own policy, and at the same time, we want to maintain that fiscal sustainability. And that's all I have on that. That's quite enough.
Is this something that goes to the council, or?
Well, this is financial, so it'd have to be adopted
Okay.
as policy,
So
so.
you need a motion.
Do you need a motion to recommend to approve it to city council?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Matt.
I'll second.
Thank you, Dan. Any further questions or discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Any opposed? Okay, excellent. So this will go to the council next week, Tuesday.
Thank you, everyone.
Can I just say I do appreciate all the hard work that the city staff has put into trying to shift from a reactionary organization to a proactive organization, because it's been very noticed over the last
Thanks.
few years that we've done a lot of work there. So thank
It's
you.
important. And the transparency is important as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's really excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That brings us to number 5, new business. So I had emailed something to folks just that we can actually talk about at some other time, maybe at a committee of the whole, I don't know, but was thinking about the strategic plan and how there are certain things in the strategic plan that seem to relate to the admin committee's responsibilities, and thinking it would be nice to have a plan over the next 3 years for things that the committee would want to help address, rather than just waiting for somebody else to decide that we should do those things. So, does anybody have any thoughts on that?
I like the idea, even setting something up that's maybe on a proposed quarterly timeline. I mean, I wouldn't go monthly, but I mean, maybe quarterly, that, like within, by third quarter of
Yeah.
2027, this should be, I actually wouldn't see a problem with that being on, part of the community development as well. Because I'm sure there's things that are going to be I'm sure there's things in the strategic plan that
Yeah.
would be between the two of them.
Definitely.
So that makes some
So-
sense.
Are you looking for like a meeting to prioritize and start directing staff on those priorities? Or are you looking for staff to start working on that and bringing it to the,
Well, so I
Committee of the
started
whole.
just by highlighting the goals that are in there. Just highlighting the ones that seemed to relate to administration. Like not, road issues. Thank you.
So let's take,
Yeah, so the strategies. So, yeah,
so this one's about infrastructure, which,
Bullet point 2 and 3 is the one you highlighted in yours.
okay. Yeah, so communication plan. So that communication, community relations, whatever, seemed to be a administration thing.
I think that's, up to city council to figure out, which committee is going to deal with these particular strategies.
Right.
It would seem that anything that's street related to me would make sense to be in transportation.
Right, but it was sort of me looking at, okay, what does it say is, under administration? Grants. It says grants. Like, oh, grants. Does that mean that's something that administration should be thinking about? So it's just, I'm trying to sort of put all of these pieces
So,
together.
It's great that we have a vision with some strategies, but we need to put action behind
Right,
those words,
exactly,
right? So
yeah.
I understand you're looking for each individual's committee, all the different
Yeah.
committees, to take ownership of the various
Yeah.
strategies for the specific focus areas.
Exactly, yeah.
Maybe that's something we could do under
Committee of the whole.
Bingo.
Yeah,
and kind of, because
Yeah.
then we have everybody, all committees available.
Yep.
And we could go through the strategies
Yeah.
and say, okay, well, let's assign that strategy to the
Yeah.
admin committee, assign that strategy to the community development committee,
Yeah.
and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
I think that would probably be the best way to do
Yeah.
that.
Kind of like what we did with the last one before this one got updated.
right, yeah,
Well, because I remember when we went through the last one, we had everything side by side. We had stuff that was, city council or the committee's responsibilities, and we had the stuff that was the city staff's. And, we're going through kind of a checklist to see, what we had done. And Dave went and checked off
Yeah.
basically everything on the city staff because he'd kind of blown through it and got through it. But then we had a lot of things that were still left over for us. And
but it's not bifurcated like that
yeah,
this time.
but I think you're right, because I think if we don't if we don't set those goals and those to-dos or those deadlines, like basically if we don't set those terms for ourselves in black and white, like, you know, we need to have this addressed by, you know, by third quarter 2026 or whatever. We don't, because we don't think about it until we do the list, and then we go, oh, look at all the things we didn't
Yes.
do. And city staff is working on their side of things,
Right.
but it would be beneficial, I think, if
Yeah.
we had something in writing there, and then that helps city staff, I don't want to say hold us accountable, but bring that up to us and say, hey, you know,
Does
it's,
this document have that checklist at the bottom? I can't remember. No.
No,
So
each
maybe
one-
that's
each-
something-
Each of these areas we came up with key strategies that we
Right.
wanted to engage, and the milestones to help us get these strategies accomplished.
So I think what a starting point would be for Lou to go and do a list, a checkpoint list for staff and a checkpoint list for council based on this document. And that way there's direction on who needs to do what prior to the committee of the whole meeting, and then it can be discussed on what committee needs to do the checkpoints for council or for, you know, for elected officials.
But I
And that
think-
would give direction from Lou's office onto what, you know, what staff handles and what, does that make
Which
sense?
department is going to handle the
Correct.
specific things. So to Lisa's point, though, you know, each of these focus areas, there are strategies that would fall under more than one
Right.
committee.
Yes.
Right.
I think is the point that you're
Right.
trying to make.
Yeah,
And so trying to allocate which strategies belong to which committee,
Yeah.
I think is what we're looking to do.
Right. That's why we need to go through and pinpoint each one and pull it out and put it in a checklist.
So I think that your first step is have staff review this and give their recommendation, and then we have a committee of the whole with those recommendations, and then the city council can go, okay, that makes, you know, we can see how we can achieve those strategies from this information from staffing, and then the council can then assign, you know, oversight of those strategies to specific committees that it would
Yeah.
fall in.
Yeah.
Does that make
Yeah,
make
that
sense?
does. That
Yeah.
makes perfect
I would
sense.
also suggest then, because you know, there's 8 different focus areas.
Yeah.
That would be a very, very long meeting. So maybe we break that up into several committees of the whole and just focus, you know, tackle a couple focus areas each
Yeah.
meeting.
Yeah.
And then that gives staff the ability to go through, you know, and give a comprehensive input
Right.
for each
each
of those
one.
2 focus areas for the committee of the whole
Right.
meeting.
Well, and then I would anticipate that, you know, after we go through this one time with a couple of them, it's a
It'll go
iterative
faster because
process,
you're-
but
yeah,
it'll
yeah.
also, you know, staff will have a better idea of what the council is feeling about that.
Right,
You know,
right.
because we're, you know, it's not, we're an active council.
Well, this document was a combination of staff and.
Yeah.
It was 2 separate sessions, but it was put together by the contractor into a single document.
Right.
So, you know, it seems to me that city council is the one that needs to make assignments to its own committees to do certain work for the city council. I mean, that's exactly how it's structured, is for the committees to do the grunt work.
Yeah.
So that the city, doesn't take up all the time of the city council, but the assignments have to be made.
Yeah.
And I think that's where you can negotiate which committee gets what.
Yeah.
You know, Mayor, is it possible to, you know, maybe even go beyond that and just take a section or a topic out of this for each regular city council meeting as an agenda item to just,
We could do that.
as, you know, along the way, I mean, don't try to eat the elephant in one bite, but just take pieces of it and then go through. And that way we're constantly working on it and updating and keeping it fresh and so on. Assign a specific amount of time for it. Because that's what we need, is we need some kind of assignment. Because that's what happens, you know, we get excited and then we forget about
We
it.
create the plan, but it's getting the action steps taken
Yeah, you have to
implement the plan.
It has to have some path to resolution.
Well, and I think if doing exactly that, you know, maybe we assign one thing each meeting or whatever, and then that allows city staff to maybe produce like a checklist of this type of thing, like a separate checklist, and as we complete those things, they can check it off, and that's something that we can publish to the public. Like, I mean, just for an example, like the downtown wireless access, you know, there is potential for that issue to be solved in the semi-near future, depending on what decisions we make based on things that could come up in front of us. We could, you know, if that's something that we're able to do, let's say before the end of the year or end of next year, we got it, we check it off. That's something that we can then, you know, say, hey, look at what we did.
Yeah, but that's a perfect example. You know, this particular focus area is about infrastructure, and we tend to gravitate to streets and
Right.
water sewer. But this is also infrastructure, and that doesn't really belong in the transportation committee. I would suggest that belongs in your committee.
I agree.
So,
Right.
each focus area is going to have, I think, multiple committees have specific assignments.
Yeah,
So I'm
exactly.
confused a little bit on what the committee will be doing that they haven't already done. And when I say that, I mean the committee and staff has done this. This is our direction. So it would seem to me that if you wanted to go through and prioritize establishing a downtown wireless streetscape, then let's go look into it. That's priority one. And then maybe another section has priority two. So instead of trying to go through and discuss what this is all going to look like, assign priorities and let us figure out what it's going to look like and bring it back to you. Does that make sense? Or am I way off on that?
No, that makes sense to me, because I think that I think that it's beneficial. Yes, we all need to decide where we're going to assign what, because something may make more sense for Charlie's committee or more for mine.
Right, and we
whatever.
need to know where to bring it back to.
Yeah.
Right.
But I also don't want it to turn into a 7-hour debate over how we prioritize that when you guys already can do that ahead of time
So-
and give
But
us
I
the.
think the council, I'm sorry, Mike.
No, go
But
right
I think the council needs to have that, play that role of prioritizing things. I
Right.
don't think that's a staff.
No,
Job.
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
The count,
So-
you tell us what's priority and we'll
Right.
bring it back to whatever committee decides they're gonna
Right.
oversee it and say, this is what that plan looks like and this is what
Yeah.
it looks like.
For
All
example,
the work as far as what we wanna do is done. Now it's a matter of what are we
Right.
gonna do first?
Exactly.
So, for example, launch a communication plan to share street improvement plan with residents. We've all, as a committee, or I mean, as a council, said that's what we want to do. Staffing is already, because that's why it's in this document. We know because it's going to be street improvements that'll fall in transportation.
Yeah.
Really, all we need to do is have staff, here's the plan, and present it to you,
Yeah.
or really to your committee, to say, here's what we recommend as the plan to accomplish this strategy. And then it's up to the committee to determine to tweak it left or right or up or down, whatever you want to do, so that we can implement it.
So step one is divide it all up, just determine which committee is gonna do what. Step two, each committee prioritizes based among the four on the committee, they decide what's gonna be priority. And then step three, hand that over to staff and say, here's priority one for our committee. Staff takes the ball, runs with it, brings it back to committee. Here's step one for our committee, or here's priority one for our committee. And like you said, don't do it all at once, because it would be huge, but we start small, and each committee gets a priority one, and we start working on it as staff. And then we figure out what it's gonna look like and bring it back to you. And does that make sense too?
It makes perfect sense.
Because then you have a three-step process, right?
So what I would-
Division, prioritize, and then act.
What I would advise before even going down that route is something that has been noticed in some of the committees is some training. And we can have McCargle does this every year after an election. But we've hardly had anybody go to their electors.
Oh, the four of us went together.
Yeah, we went,
But that was
when we were
right.
first elected,
When
we
we were
all
first
went to the-
elected, we all went.
we all
But
went to
but
it.
it's something just like training for staff should be done every year.
They don't do it every year.
They do it
They do it after
election.
every election. That's
Right.
every other year.
Yeah.
So be it every other year, my suggestion is before we even go down this route is to essentially have a refresher. And it's not just for
Lou, I've been here for going on
Lisa,
6
I'm
years
just
doing this.
offering my
I've
advice.
gone to the training.
I'm only offering my
We all
advice.
spent a day. We have the books.
Lisa, let's see
Sorry.
what Lou has to say first.
Okay.
Like I said, I'm here to offer my advice. And my advice, considering how some of these committees have broken down over conversations, it wouldn't be a bad thing to do. And also start implementing more of, is it Roger's rules? Robert's rules, thank you. Just to help keep meetings moving forward instead of breaking down, be it committee meetings or council meetings. And this is something TJ's group can do. And if we're going to have a meeting of the whole, that'd be a good time to do this.
I mean, Lisa, I don't see a problem with, maybe not go every.
Well, I
election,
don't
But we are going to
see-
have some new members on city council here in the next election cycle. 'Cause are you running again, Matt? I don't think you are. You haven't. Yeah, well, yeah, I don't. Some members have stated that they are not intending to run again.
Yeah, Jay's
and
been very clear. Jay's
Yeah, and
done
others may
2
decide
terms,
to
yeah.
stay or not stay, whatever. But should new members come on, I don't have a problem with going to the training. I think that obviously new members should go to the training. I highly encourage it because if they have no,
If we're so not not running our committees and business appropriately, why didn't that show up in the plan as something that is a priority that we should be focusing on is improving our governance as
Well, this-
elected officials?
Again,
And how does that relate to prioritizing things for the city?
because there's a danger that ends up happening when, at times, when people divide things up and then forget where the boundaries are. Because we can very easily start getting down a road where micromanagement happens. And if we start the process where everybody, both staff and elected officials and the appointed ones for our committees, understand where those boundaries are before you go down this route, then you have a much better idea of how to cut this up. And you can take my advice, you can disregard it. I'm just stating what would be a prudent step before going down this route.
So basically, let's just sit on it until next spring.
I did not say sit on it.
Well, yeah, you kind of did.
No,
Your plan?
3 year.
it's a 3-year.
This
It's
is
a three-year
okay.
plan. So, we're already,
And this is a 3-year plan to get the ball rolling, not to accomplish everything, correct? This is just to take us the next,
well, presumably the progress milestones are for the 3 years.
but beginning by certain years, not necessarily completed, just
Yeah,
beginning.
there's
Okay.
gonna be some that we complete.
Yeah.
And some
So-
that we probably won't be close to complete, but at least get the ball rolling.
Get started.
Just
So
like
we
the
don't
last
have
master plan.
a ton of time to get started, but
Right.
we do have a little time.
I think
So I would suggest, just my suggestion, based on what we talked about earlier with the capital improvement plan, that within the next, let's see, what year are we going into? 24 or 25? That we start looking at this within the next year, because realistically, we don't meet as a committee of a whole that often. And take it in steps, as Alderman Gorman suggested, and maybe incorporate the capital improvement plan review with this, because they kind of do go hand in hand. A lot of this is capital improvement, and then at the same time, maybe bring in the equipment replacement. I've read it, I haven't read it in detail, so I need to go back and look at it a little closer. But that way, we can kind of knock everything out at once and make sure that it all complements each other. Because to do any of these, we're gonna need what?
Funding.
Funding. We gotta figure out where that funding's going to come from, and that's part of the capital improvement plan. If you would look back, there's a grid inside that plan that says on the very far right side, how are we gonna fund it? Is it gonna be general funds? Is it gonna be grant dollars? Is it gonna be whatever? So all that kind of coordinates together. So instead of rushing to just start going forward with this, which again, we don't have a ton of time, but maybe kind of structure it a little bit so that we're not wasting our time with meetings and having to come back and forth. So we do have a little time to maybe start with that and then move forward with the next phase and by the end of the 3 years, we have everything ready to roll for the next 5 years or however long we decide to do the capital improvement plan.
I think since Lisa brought it up, I agree. I think the concern, and again, I'm not trying to speak for you, but I think the way I'm thinking of it is the concern is that we as committees, all of our committees, need to, I guess, have somebody or some way of keeping this in the forefront so that our agendas, I mean, obviously things that staff can do without direction or even with direction, go ahead and do it. But if there's asks and things that we need to allow you to accomplish these things, instead, it would benefit us if it's either A, automatically on the agenda, like, hey, this needs to be addressed, or brought to our attention that, hey, by, it's Q3 of 2026 and we're looking at this and we've got some things that we need you to do. Can we put it on the agenda for the next 3 months or whatever? Just so that we're staying on top of it. Because yes, we don't have committees of the whole all the time. We don't want to have them,
Right.
nonstop. But we also don't want to have nothing addressed on here until we get to a committee of the whole.
Right.
Then we assign a few things. Then we wait till the next committee of the whole and we realize all those things didn't get accomplished
Right.
or whatever. So there's, there's a little bit more regular oversight. So we want to do it. We just have to make sure that the assignments are being handed out so that we can accomplish it.
To be clear, if we just take this particular one that we're looking at, there are strategies that are set forth for us that we all agreed on to complete. Some of that work is going to be done by city staffing,
Yep.
right? And all you need to do, whichever committee takes over that strategy, says, here's a strategy, and direct staffing to do it. I mean, it's as simple as that.
Yep.
Some of it they won't be able to do because you need to provide them funding to be able to accomplish some of those things, which brings in the capital improvement / capital equipment
Yep.
fund. So to Deb's point, it does need to be an orchestrated activity of these various things. So when I look at this list here and it says, for instance, begin street improvements with new funding supported by taxpayers. Well, we know that's not even going to start until next fiscal year because we have already made a decision to set that funding aside. And you've already directed staff to set that funding aside. So funding is being set aside to be utilized to begin in 2025. That's a pretty easy one to complete because we already know that that's going to happen. We've been moving to that direction. The other than that, look at the next one where it says engage these other, let's call them entities within the that we could partner with. Well, that doesn't mean that the committee is going to go call RTA or call
Right.
Metra. Staffing is going to do that, right? So, whichever committee that falls under, and in this case, I think most of that is all related to streets. The transportation would just simply say, okay, staffing, within the next X number of months, please reach out to each of these entities and see how we could create additional opportunities for this type of access. And frankly, I think on maybe not necessarily day-to-day basis, but on a monthly basis as these things come out, staffing is engaged with these various entities through the course of their normal work days. So I think for Lou's benefit, I think he's looking for, we need direction from city council or the various committees for staffing to start completing some of these tasks. But once you assign that to them, then the how that is accomplished falls under his office. And
Yeah.
he directs staff on how they accomplish that goal. And then his job is to bring that back to that committee and say, okay, you assigned us to do this. Staffing has done this, and this is our feedback to you on what you have requested of staffing. And that way, for one of Lou's concerns in terms of micromanagement is he's the manager. He drives the organization from day-to-day activities. He just needs the direction from that committee. Okay, this strategy, please go accomplish it. However your staff does it, but that's your direction is to go create that strategy and then bring it back for the committee to review. So I think going forward, I think my recommendation to this committee and to the council as a whole, maybe we do a thing like Charlie has suggested. Maybe each month we set an agenda item. Okay, let's talk about this specific focus area and have a discussion. Have that agenda item allow us to discuss it and then assign which strategies fall under which committee. And then when those committees meet, we just need a standing agenda item on their committee to review the strategic vision to make sure that you're keeping it in the forefront.
And I think
And you want to do that at council? At a
Yeah, I was
council
gonna,
meeting?
so
That would
with
be-
that, sorry. Go ahead, Deb. And
No,
then-
I just would think that would
Well,
make it quite lengthy.
No, that's what I was gonna bring that up, because, there are months that we don't have much on city council. And even when we have short stuff, there are topics that the public and even us are still hashing things out. But I do like the committee of the whole, part, because we only do quarterly, and I know we don't keep up with that, and it's fine if we don't need to, but like I said, bring it to the committee of the whole and get this done. And on Lou's mentioning, unless I'm not seeing it, I have not, at least my two committees, I haven't seen anything, because we've done this, we let staff, hey, this, and they come back to us, and and then the committees, we might, if we disagree with something, like ask, hey, what's going on? Well, and when I only usually go in Lou's office to ask, hey, if I have stuff, and I one-on-one with him. I don't go around to every department head. I mean, sometimes I see Deb because I know she has the paperwork, and it's not a big issue. I don't think it is. Hopefully, it's not, Lou.
Plus Lou's gone, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
So
Well, you are the assistant.
yeah. So, and I don't know. I guess hopefully I haven't been on that side, but at least from what I've seen, I haven't noticed that. But maybe the other committees have. But I know with ours, and I know that's why Lisa got heated on that. Is we have not seen that, and Lisa's just trying to get this going. We understand that we do, send it to you guys, and then we might ask like 2 months later because we know might be a 5-month project. Hey, how's that coming along? In our committee meetings. That's at least what I've seen since I've been on council in 2019. So.
Are we?
So
Thank
I
you.
have no issue of going to a committee of whole to create, to divvy this up for lack of a better term. I just wouldn't want to do the entire thing
No, and
under
that's
one committee.
when you
of the whole.
mentioned that, like put like those like one section. That's definitely that whole
But
thing.
I would like to do it more than quarterly because then,
Then, yeah.
we wouldn't get through this for 2 years with 8
Right.
focus years, right? So,
Yeah.
Maybe then we do a committee of the whole and maybe we do 3 or half, or I don't know. So we can get it accomplished and get things rolling before the end of the year. I think
yeah.
there is a sense of urgency to not let this die on the vine, right?
Yeah.
Is
Well,
it-
and I, I've seen other plans that then include sort of at the end is sort of a matrix that has all of the strategies and just very simply indicates who's in the lead, who's the point of contact, and then what's the time frame. It's like, is this immediate? Is this just an ongoing operational thing? Is this long term? So that there's some indication of time and responsibility, just so there's a way to then track and evaluate, over the 3 years, assuming that we
Would it be possible?
evaluate it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Would it be possible for staff to review this and type up suggestions of what should go to each committee? Submit that to all of the alder people prior to the committee of the whole with enough time for each person to review it, so a couple weeks ahead of time, and knock it all out in one meeting?
That's possible.
Because all the actual legwork would be done on what Lou thinks should go where, right? And then you folks would have time to move around your own opinion of what you think should go, and we could review it all during a committee of the whole meeting and get the whole document done and knock
That would
out.
be fantastic, because then we don't have any encumbrance in terms of getting each committee working
Right.
on their activities.
And then from that point, you could start, now the committees have been assigned, then each committee can have a meeting, and the next step is prioritizing and get that done at the next committee meeting.
So my recommendation, if we want to pursue that, and I think that's prudent, because then it gives staff time to kind of review and give their recommendations, and then at the committee of the whole, the committee, the council can make final decisions. I would suggest, let's push this to like a June committee of the whole meeting. That gives staff plenty of time to be able to review that. Plus, by that time, we will have another department head on board who might be able to give some input to that. And let's plan on a committee of the whole in mid to late June.
Great.
Does that work?
Yeah, I like your idea, Mike, of maybe having like every committee have an agenda item other than like new business, but one that just maybe review, just a generic one of just
Strategic
review
thing, yeah.
strategic vision agenda or whatever, or items. That gives us the freedom in that meeting item to just throw up the board, see where we're at, and say, okay,
Yeah.
is there anything that city staff needs direction on, yay or nay?
Right.
Is there anything that we need to put on our agenda for specifically to discuss next month or whatever, and we can stay on top
Some meetings
of
we might not even talk about, because we know
Yeah,
it's
yeah, there may
not
be
in.
nothing- yeah, there may be
Right.
nothing, or
that
nothing.
meeting might say, oh, well, there's no real updates for that
that.
particular
Yeah, or,
meeting.
and really, and that would give Lou or the rest of staff, whoever's there actually, because it might not even be, administration that's doing it, but
Right.
if there's something they've finished or they just have an update on the progress, like, hey, we've put out for RFQs on this, or we've gotten paperwork back on this is where we're at. It could be that simple as just, this is where we're at on it. There's no action items, but we're making progress. I would be thrilled with that, because then it's transparent to us, but it's also transparent to the public when we're having these meetings and these items are put up there. And I think also when we're making progress on this, it's also a significant way for city staff to kind of ring their bell, like, hey, look at what we're getting done for the city, instead of a lot of it happening behind closed
Yeah.
curtains. And then, then when something does happen, then they get their time to shine. They're actually being able to consistently show what they're getting done.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I think we can do that. By July, figure July or August, it would be a standing item, and we should have some kind of at least
Yeah.
checklist
Have a
items and go through
process
them.
and, yeah, that'd be great. Thank you, Dan. Any other comments? Okay. Any other new business?
We got our first additional sales tax revenue payment,
And
67,800-ish.
and that was for a month?
That was for the month of January.
Okay.
So it's a little lower than we thought, but when I looked back at trends, the month of January is always low.
Okay.
Probably people coming off of Christmas for the most part,
Oh, yeah.
not spending as much, so I'm looking for it to be a little higher next year. Next month, and I will report back when I get that.
Thank you.
Next month.
But we
so
did
probably
get it.
February's.
We did get it, and the good news is, because I was kind of stressing over this, how I was gonna separate it out. Like, how am I gonna calculate this additional 1%, because I know it's not the full,
Right?
and they sent it separately.
Yay.
With a separate report, so I don't have to do
Yay.
anything. So it's been deposited in the capital improvement account, which is lumped together with other things, but I do have a separate spreadsheet going to keep track of what is, and it's also posted in the ledger as additional 1%. We're calling it non-home rule sales tax because that's what the state is calling it. So that's what we'll refer to it to as well, so it's clear. So the non-home rule sales tax.
Thank you for sharing that.
Sure,
that-
no problem.
That number is still low. It's like just annualized out at the 60-something thousand. I mean, we're still.
We trended that way. By the end of the year, we'd have 800,000.
Yeah, so I mean, that's still nothing to sniff at. That's some
No,
shit we can
I mean,
do a
it's
lot
something.
of.
We were hoping for more like $1 million, right, Charlie? But
Yeah, I see that.
we'll see. I think
I see it getting
you know
close
people are
to
going to be
that.
spending more money as it gets nicer out. So I'm confident it'll go up.
If you were to look at past history, you would see there's a dip right
Yeah.
after
Yeah.
Christmas because everybody's tightening their wallet because they just spent all their money on Christmas. So I'm not
Not overly
I'm not too
concerned.
concerned at this
Yeah.
juncture.
I mean, Dave occasionally would send out his like big spreadsheet.
I just did one. I actually sent
Did
it to Charlie yesterday, just a 5-year history.
Okay,
So,
of sales tax.
and I plan on doing that for all of them at the end of the fiscal year. So I'll send those out when I get them all done.
Okay.
That sales tax includes like food and liquor and stuff in town. So I'm thinking like, warm weather, patio
Oh.
season.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
The bars in town start getting kind of
Yeah,
busy.
summer always
so-
brings in more revenue. so,
Yeah. So
yeah.
Yeah, but that's 1%. I mean, it's pretty low. I was surprised.
Drink a
that-
lot.
Restaurant is actually not. Restaurant food and all of that. It's the groceries that are the 1%.
Yeah.
So yeah, the restaurant and the alcohol and all that, they pay
Yeah, that
full.
goes up.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
the
that's-
one that surprised me is cars. That's our largest income for sales tax.
Yes, but that
Yes.
is not included on the home rule.
Right.
Oh, I know, I'm just saying though, that as far as the
Yeah.
general report is.
Oh, yeah. Vehicle sales
by
is
far.
a huge income revenue.
And then general merchandise is second.
Walmart.
And evidently nobody buys clothes because
Apparel is very low. Yeah. Well, we really don't have a lot of options around here. If we had a mall or something, we might do better with that. But
Well, yeah, and like Walmart,
Or
they're not
Kohl's.
separating it out.
yeah,
yeah,
You know.
I think if you're a big box store or like
Right.
something like Walmart, you don't separate that out.
I've seen the fashions the last couple of years. I'm not a fan, so I'm holding off until something better comes out.
Sticking with the classics.
Hey.
Yeah. So, okay, any other new business? Okay, then motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Matt. Second.
Thanks for all
Thank
your
you,
time tonight.
Charlie. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.